Hello, hello, hello. It's Lacey. Welcome to Venus RX. This is where I talk about topics that are on my mind right now, usually supernatural, esoteric, or cultural, religious, political, usually blending them all together in my life experiences. Okay, I wanted to get into the Muslim religion and Islam and how it connects with the destruction of the Black community, but not just that, how it connects into Christianity and Luciferianism. The best way to start would be, believe it or not, like the drones in the sky in New Jersey, or the lights in the sky and the plasmoids, and those coming from the lightbringer. Halal itself means Lucifer. Some people say in old text it translates to Lucifer slash the planet Venus. Okay. But also they say it represents the Queen of Heaven. And as I was telling you, I had signed a contract with Anana, the Queen of Heaven, on the I made a soul contract in an astrology website. And that being the planet Venus and a bunch of weird things happening and those lights coming over the sky. But getting back to halal, I also know it as meaning food from the stars, like halal. Someone told me that, it means star food. When I was in New York, I'm like, food of the stars. I'm like, all right. And I had to look into it, and it means like Venetian eats, it means Luciferian eats. It translates, yeah, a bunch of times to light eats. And yeah, so halal, meaning Lucifer. And I'm going to plug it in because this church guy, he kind of explains it a little better than me because he connects it to Gnosticism. So I'll give you a little clip right here. Hopefully this works.
Example. The word halal in Isaiah chapter number 14, verse number 12, that's translated Lucifer in the Latin Bible, and it comes down to us into the English Bible, was a reference to the morning star. It was a reference to the planet Venus, well known 2,700 years ago as being represented by, guess what? The Queen of Heaven. The Queen of Heaven has among her titles, one of her titles is Mother of God. Theotokos, they called it. They had a big dogfight in the first century after Christ about the wording Mother of God, Mother of God. Now the Virgin Mary is the mother of our Lord Jesus Christ, all right? Okay? But she did not give birth to God. She gave birth to the God-man. And he knew when he got to Isaiah chapter number 14, verse number 12, aha, that's the devil. That's the devil. And a lot of what he did, he based it on the work of Tertullian and on the work of Irenaeus. And when he got to that passage right there, he had read where the Lord Jesus says, I saw Satan as lightning fall from heaven. And so he said, that's Hillel, that's Venus, that's the morning star, that's Lucifer.
But yeah, getting back into it. Okay, back to halal and the lights in the sky. There's a famous painting of Jesus, and let's connect Jesus to that star. There's a quote in the Bible where Jesus says, I am likened to that star. And also, we could connect it to Lent. Lent is like when Venus is in retrograde. Venus is in retrograde for about 40 days and 40 nights. Same thing like Lent. It's observed 40 days, 40 nights before the return of Esther. Easter, Esther, and if you look up Esther, there's some similarities between the goddess Esther and Anana here, and also maybe Aphrodite. That's another being that's connected to that star. Easter, East Star, in the East Star, coming back from the East. It's very all connected, and even down to the bunny and the bunny coming with eggs, but eggs, bunnies don't lay eggs. So the eggs are representing fertility, goddess, mother, Esther coming here. Um, Also, okay, I'm trying to connect this to a painting of Jesus. I'm gonna plug in the painting of Jesus here, where you can see those drones or those lights in the sky. So when Jesus was being crucified, or maybe people were coming after him, I believe the Venetian aliens came through, or how Gnostics will describe it, or how you might describe it, is as of angels. Angels coming to save Jesus when Jesus was being sacrificed. This is very important, my belief, on how Jihad came about in the Islam tradition. Act of jihad, like sacrificing someone, killing them, burnt offerings here, because when Jesus was sacrificed, and I believe out of envy because of his connection to source, or people didn't like that he said he was like a God man or a man of God, or, and, okay, so those drones came after Jesus was sacrificed, because I believe those drones to be archons or angels coming down to save Jesus. These archons came from Sophia, not Sophia. These archons apparently came from Yadobeeth. So yeah, Sophia, the first mother, Sophia means knowledge or wisdom. It could also mean Lucifer. Gnosis means Lucifer. So Sophia birthed Yadobeeth, and then Yadobeeth apparently started birthing these strange mechanisms and archons, like the drones and like, different things that like fly around. There's beef with him and Sophia, and then the meaning of material meaning evil, and I have evil and live, love. There's also the lorem ipsum text that is put in our subconscious as a filler text, and that is it's on the extremes of good and evil. It's like an ancient Roman text here. Forgive me if I'm jumping around. Like, as I told you, there's a lot of things came to me in layers. I was taught things in layers, but I'm sure you understand because I'm just giving you background to why Muslims, had its influence on the Black community and how they know how to influence it. And not just the Black community, America in general. Let me pause for a second to get, okay. So we're going back to Jesus. So let's say Jesus was sacrificed. This is how I believe that the Muslim tradition came about. Different people's handling Jesus' sacrifice. I could talk about Gnosticism coming from Mary, but specifically Muhammad. I believe Muhammad and others like him had witnessed Jesus being sacrificed, and they didn't just witness Jesus being sacrificed. They witnessed those drones coming down, or the lights in the sky coming down to save Jesus, the archons, that was created by Yadobeeth. Another thing about Yadobeeth is Yadobeeth was our original coin in America. If you look on the back of the dollar, there's like a triangle there. Some people connect that with Egyptian triangle, and yeah, the bottom part is, but that triangle might be an astral alignment that could be considered Yadobeeth. It's funny because as an Aries rising, a Leo moon, and a Sagittarius sun, fire, 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 that could be considered a Yadobeeth, whereas Cancer, Pisces, and Scorpio all in one chart as the main could be considered a Leviathan. A Leviathan is like a creature of the sea, and those are all the water signs right here. Yadobeeth is like a fire sign, and it's all the fires here. And if you look at Yadobeeth, maybe I'll plug a picture in here. This is going to take so much editing. I'll plug a picture in, maybe the original coins. Yeah, like yeah, so it looks like a Leo Sagittarius Earth thing here. But that being said, I believe them witnessing this miracle and them calling the drones in the sky Allah. They begin to refer to the drones as Allah. They knew that those drones came from that star. I believe Jesus probably taught them Luciferianism or Gnosticism, or because he did say, I'm likened to that star, and that star was giving him special gifts, and even charisma, possibly love, maybe had Mary, he might have had other girls, because I like connecting Jesus to Oedipus and him being born of the nymphs and like, having a bunch of hoes around. Like, but that being said, I believe Muhammad saw this and then he went and he made up his own religion and he said in order to bring Allah down that they have to murder, they have to kill, they have to commit acts of jihad to finally get the lights to come back down, like or the lights to appear in the sky. So this is their ultimatum. That's and then this is what I gather learning about the Muslim tradition and why they jihad for in the name of Allah. They're ultimately trying to get what they believe is God to come or the Queen of Heaven to come down. That was strange. As soon as I mentioned the Queen of Heaven, my mic went out and it started flashing, my little mic light. Queen of Heaven might have came down. That's another thing to note because I was talking about the planet Venus and Halal and Lucifer. And you notice the Aphrodite's hand mirror, that's the same symbolism that represents woman, that represents, mother, it represents Sophia, so wisdom and the wisdom that was given to women around that time period. This is another thing that I believe plays a large role in the misogyny in the Muslim religion here. Because connecting it back to Mary Magdalene, I feel like these men who became Muslims purposely did the opposite of what Mary Magdalene told them to. And Mary Magdalene was known as Jesus's favorite disciple. Mary Magdalene was a spiritual leader in her own right, and down to I was also going to talk about mana versus Christos. So mana, that could be like the life force energy that comes from women when you put that into men, and it's supposed to inspire them, maybe protect them, heal them. That's why I was going to connect Jesus to Oedipus, Oedipus and other figures like that that were not like Zeus, like maybe you're the son of Zeus, Hercules, that's it, Hercules. Okay, yeah, that's another god man. And the god men will often hail from nymphs. Nymphs were like female spirits, like of the water hair, or not of the water, of different elements. So you had wood nymphs that was connected to trees. They connect Jesus if you go into like the Druids and learning about self knowledge, leaving a little bit of like the traditional stuff into like maybe I would say that's Druids, that's Irish, that's Celt religion. You'll find that these wood nymphs, they have similar, everybody has a Jesus in their religion, basically a God man. And at some point, just like Oedipus, I believe Jesus might have been being healed by maybe a house of nymphs. And I believe these nymphs might have been invaded and they were made to be clothed because of the energy that they gave to like God men here, even down to like their breasts and stuff like that. They wanted women to be clothed and they want to be able to kind of have that power for themselves because Jesus, after his death, Mary had a vision. She had a vision of Jesus. Jesus, and she asked, how does one see a vision? And then Jesus explained how he was like communicating with her. It's a lot. So give me a moment to like conceptualize this. Okay. So this is Muhammad and him, I believe, setting up his own religion against everything Mary Magdalene told them to do. Jesus said to remember the God, the inner child within. He specifically said, don't listen to people when they tell you don't do this, don't do that. And then Muhammad started teaching about obedience and obedience to like this false god, I believe, and just started making up things. They also took out a lot of female names in the Bible, and as like it's important when they show here, like down to goddess Esther, Easter. There's a lot of feminine figures in the Bible. There were a lot more prominent religious figures, as we could see in every other religion, every tradition, even down to ancient Sumerians. They worship women. In ancient Egypt, there were female goddesses. There's too many female goddesses and spiritualists prominent in every culture for me to feel like that the Bible that we go by is legit, because it has, and they only has a lot of prominent male figures in there. They even tried to make Lucifer seem as though he was a he, rather than every other religion saying Lucifer being the most beautiful angel. Lucifer was a representation of like women, and then it came down to the demonization of women and sex. Bring that into the black community because I'm gonna jump around. Bring that into like misogyny. I've often asked black people what happened to hip hop, like Common Sense, and a lot of them have told me that it was crack in the '80s. They brought crack to the hoods in the '80s. I'm like, and I was looking at a lot of black towns. I was watching like their eyes were watching God. I was noting that in middle America, there's a lot of abandoned black towns that you can actually go buy back. You can buy land in Nebraska from $0 to $500. You just have to move in a certain time period. But I'm like, I don't think it was the police. Maybe the Democrats did help in bringing in foreigners to get more votes, because I feel like a lot of Americans don't really care to vote. Like this, that's just something that I like. I feel like they don't get enough votes in general. So maybe these are things that they're withstanding. Another thing to note is that a lot of foreigners, they dump in cities near black people. I noticed like even down to the hoods in New York City, the beauty supply stores are mostly Asian owned. A lot of black and African women, they had to fight for their rights to have that type of weave, because weave is actually like coming from India here. Like hood rat, I find that to be interesting too, because a lot of cultures are deeply engraved into what we call black culture. When I think of black culture, like true black culture, I think of things like Eve's Bayou. I think of like their eyes were watching God. And rather than what I then say is Muslim culture or Jihad culture, where it gets down to things like The Wire, like, and Paid in Full. I'm like, those are like acts of jihad here. And then I start thinking about drive-bys. Why are we calling them drive-bys and not mass shootings here? And gangs, those are serial killer cults. Like they're almost like glorified, or like, I don't know, it's some sort of weird backwards like thing here. Uh that's not funny. Hold on. Also prevalent in hip hop is misogyny. And they also discovered that Muslims had 100-year plan in ruining America. Why are they ruining America? They're creating acts and terrorism everywhere because they want to kill until they bring Allah back, until they bring the drones in the sky down. And then the drones in the sky are going to give them the same power that Jesus had. So it's almost like they're trying to create an energetic switch. That's another thing I wanted to note. Of like, first, Muslims did this to black people. Black people are trying to do this to white people, or the black man is trying to do this to the white woman, even down to making a Karen uh more of a problem than a Quran. I'm like, yo, a Quran is always going to be more of a problem than a Karen. Using stories like Emmett Till. Oh, Emmett Till was lied on. Oh, there, like, it was very intricate too, but they want you to protect the black man. That way, it takes away the protection from some of our most softest people here, because white women, they commit like the least amount of crime outside of maybe the white women in government and maybe the white women who are like elitists. And then they want you to focus more on women's mindsets and attitudes rather than the actions of people here, because action, this is also where I get afraid at. I'm like, I don't think we should be giving black male criminals more protection when it's way more unsafe for a white woman to walk down the street than a black man. So I'm like, why are we marching for them? And then not only that, the specific man they chose to have march for, which was George Floyd. George Floyd broke into a woman's house, a pregnant woman's house, with not one, not two, not three, but five men, and beat her while she was pregnant. And this is the type of man we were marching for here. I'm like, that was specifically ingrained by Muslim culture and maybe even possibly Democrats here, because I'm like, with the amount of money they stole, they just use people's race, people's religion, and they don't really care what's going on. They don't really fix their problems. They kind of victim blame everybody for their own problems, and they go on here. Connecting this also to drugs. I'm like, I can tell you, I'm like, I don't believe white people brought the drugs, because connecting that back to the UK, I don't want America to turn into the UK and hearing about its grooming gangs. I'm like, those grooming gangs happened in Chicago in the 80s. Those grooming gangs came in Muslim territory too. That's why we have Malcolm Shabazz X. This is why so many black people have Muslim names. Names that you think are like ghetto names are not African names. They're not made up. Those weird names are Muslim names. Even names like Shanika, Shaniqua, and Keisha, and Jihad, and Quran, and like Hassan, and Rasan. There's like so many Muslim names ingrained into black culture. Names like Ajara, Adama, Madonna. These are African names. Like they're a lot different than the ghetto names, and that's when a lot of black people were in their Muslim phase, their bean pie phase. That is crazy to me, because what did Malcolm X do? Malcolm X came in with the house Negro rhetoric. He's the one to coin the phrase house Negro, and he talked about how lighter skinned blacks were more likely to align with white people, and that they were a problem here. Light skins think they're cute, and blah 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 blah. He started colorism in the black community. That's an act of jihad here. And how did he start that? Obviously through reading the Quran. He was a Muslim, so he read the Quran, and he came to the conclusion that lighter people were the bad people, just like when you get down to the UK, grooming gang, white girl, cocaine. I'm like, yeah, they believe white girls are unclean, so they get to bully and try to rape white women. Like, and a lot of black people do engage in games where they feel like they could bully light skinned individuals. And they regularly say that light skins are soft, but they feel like light skins think they're cute. So therefore, that act of thinking that you might be attractive, you're unclean, deserving of being brought down. Whereas being darker and more violent and aggressive is upheld in the black community. Market Kane. That's where that comes in too. So that's the main concern here. That's why I'm like, yeah, better Malcolm Shabazz X that Muslim-ish out. A lot of black individuals feel like they can put on basically, you're not black. Oh, light skin. And why are they all light skinned coming in when they see photos of light skinned women? That's wrong. You need to shut the fuck up. Like, for real, that's colorist. Nobody cares if they're all light skinned or dark skinned. You shouldn't be commenting on anybody's race or whether they're mixed or really black. They're not black enough. You don't get to decide that, because those people who are darker and had a more privileged lifestyle, they don't like when you judge their blackness based off of living in the suburbs and not being around jihadists, the hood. No, you got to stop associating black with a certain lifestyle. No, you have to stop associating black with a certain lifestyle. That's what they started to use as fuel here. Also, obviously, with the amount of mosque in the Bronx and the amount of tobacco stores, these tobacco stores sell things like Rush that you sniff up your nose and a series of other drugs. They came out with whippets. Hey, try whippets, so that they could irritate your chest. The cigarettes that they give in the hood, a lot of people notice are laced. They're a different type of cigarette here. I stopped smoking once I got to New York because I started to develop eclampsia off of the cigarettes that was given out in a deli, and even down to the grava hair. So they're putting some sort of chemical in there, I believe, to get black people addicted to smoking. Not just that, to make them go on to heavier drugs here. I'm like, I'll never trust the marijuana in the Habib stores or the weed shops. Now they're opening up with weed shops, and they're doing something where they could lace the weed after you buy it, and it'll burn your throat hair. And then you go to call the police, even though weed is legal. The police are like, well, why are you smoking weed then? I'm like, what's the point of giving us the weed if we can't have it? And I know you can, it's like very easy to go over to one of those stores and see that they are lacing the marijuana, burning black people's throats, and people are just more concerned with twerking and single motherhood here. It also falsely raised the ego of black men. You got black men asking women, what do they bring to the table? What do you mean, what do they bring to the table? There's your table and there's my table. If you want a woman at your table, you got to tell her why she's there and what you might want from that woman. But you only want sex from these women. And this is another thing, that bitches ain't shit but hoes and tricks. They ain't but hoes and tricks. It also started a fierce amount of competition here. They want light skins to feel like dark skins are being treated better. They want dark skins to feel like light skins are being treated better. Only dumb itches fall for that. A lot of black men have this false self-esteem based off of all they got to do is be George Floyd. They're good enough being a drug addict, breaking into houses. They should still be loved. They should still be appreciated. Whereas the black woman has to walk on eggshells. They're like, oh, your hair weave, oh, you do this, oh, you do that. Not to say there's not many problems with black women. Their biggest problem is Stockholm syndrome and putting their femininity last and putting the ego of the black man first and continuing to baby a man that does not uphold them. And then not only that, stop romanticizing gangsters. A lot of people like George Floyd, he should have never made it out of prison after doing that to a woman. All of them should have been put to rest. How else did Muslims start destroying the family dynamic in America? It didn't just touch black men. It started to touch on incel culture here. Men who could not appeal to women. They started with red pill and the simp. The phrase simp is specifically created to shame men out of protecting women. The word gold digger is to shame men out of providing for women here. And these are all like the red pill rhetoric and hip hop. After I became familiar with the Quran and Jihad, I'm like, that's directly Muslim territory here. Those are acts of the Quran. These are like what Muslims believe, like how women should be treated. Where when it comes down to it, women just are not committing a majority of the crime in the world. We don't have guns. We don't have bombs. Well, we don't have bombs. So you have essentially innocent individuals having to earn their protection by dressing a certain way, respectability politics, I call them. Whereas you have men being protected even though they need to go to sleep. Like loser men should not be protected and shouldn't be understood and glorified, where women are kind of looked at like, well, why are you walking alone at night? Why didn't you have a man with you? That's scary here in America. So, like, that was directly had to be slowly ingrained, and also through just rejection revenge, too. I feel like they started appealing to a lot of lonely, autistic men online with that type of red pill rhetoric, and then just a lot of pill Cosby. Just like a lot of abuse. Tina Turner, like just it's like I don't know many black women, even down to Little Kim getting abused. Rihanna, it's like it's just a heavy amount of abuse of women in America. Like, especially in the hip hop industry, in the black music industry, there's a lot of raping going on, like a lot of P. Diddy ish. Not to say that it's not happening in other areas, but when I look at things like even Raz B story, B2K, I'm like, this is way too much here. I'm like, what's really going on? What's really going on? Somebody was bred a superiority complex here, where oh goodness. Then okay, respectability politics. Let's get back to Mary Magdalene being, one of Jesus' saviors. She knew, like at the end, that some of the disciples were scared. They were like, if Jesus wasn't spared, then will we be spared? And, she said, well, God has prepared us and turned us into perfect men. Like, I'm like, and I think about that because she's a woman saying turned us into perfect men, aka people who are prepared to go on and preach anyway. So she was obviously a strong person, but people say calling her a prostitute. Why was Mary Magdalene called a prostitute? I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with prostitution, just so you know here. That being said, because men are supposed to be providers. That's what I feel like. If we're getting back into tradition, like there's no such thing as a simp, men are supposed to be protectors. That's what I believe. That being said, she might have been a Harador, and as I was talking about before, nymphs, and nymphs recharging men who were out But a haridul is someone specifically that works as a sexual healer within the church, usually a female that works within the church to provide sexual healing. So healing, it was known to be healing, healing these sex acts and stuff. So it wasn't, marry to versus marriage versus ho 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 dopamine, marry, marry, marry. It can lead to happiness, or marrying was something you did when you had someone that made you happy. You created merriment with that person, but it was not taught to abstain from sex before marriage. Okay, but we do abstain from sex for certain time periods, like during the Venus retrograde, where I believe our bodies are based on around the solar system. If you get a book like The God Man, The Word Made Flesh, I'm looking to see if I have that because it connects. If I have that by, this might be Nymphs of God. Oh yeah, wrong book. But either way, that book connects the body and the solar system and how different planets kind of rule over us, in our body at certain time periods. So getting into Lent and Jesus being like that star, a lot of people around Venus retrograde may not if you're a natural Venetian, you may not necessarily be feeling like giving away your mana or your Christos, because it's more or less taking out a charge here. Around that time period. That being said, not to say there's anything wrong with the virgin marry. There are people who can happily remain virgins. They can use that mana, that energy to create, hair. Just like much like cheerleaders. I'm like, cheerleaders are put at football games for a reason, and they have those girls cheering men on because it really adds to the game here. It adds mana, to their Christos is some sort of charge that a man gets from a woman here, but I feel like a lot of that was made to be evil. They started putting it backwards. That being said, dis-ease and the sexual dis-ease here is when you're creating sex with someone who you're not comfortable with, someone who you're not happy with marrying or having sex with, and you continue to do that person anyway, you create some sort of dis-ease here. A lot of black men were taught how to create dis-ease, whether it's in thieving, whether it's in just doing acts to like violate women during sex here, maybe even recording it or shaming it later. That kind of brought about AIDS, it brought about disease, and it brought down the black men's detriment. So that's getting into destiny switching. Why a lot of Muslims here are effective in America without you noticing is because they were able to get a lot of black men to do their crimes while they kind of set back and they didn't engage in it directly in America. There's a lot of people in America who sees Indians as like innocent. I'm like, do you know what it's like in India? Like search street harassment, like like they will rape you in groups. Like, it's like, ooh, strange. Like, and like I was saying, down to them putting Asians over our hair care, and because of the heads being shaved in India, to donate it to the rat god. There's some Indian rat god there, and they shave their heads, but they collect that hair and they call it Malaysian hair or Malaysian hair. A lot of Malaysian hair you get in hair weave, it's really shaved off some Indian's head in like India or Dubai even, because they have a specific type of thick hair that can be put on weave. There are some Spanish countries too who they unlayer it and they cut the weave out in like layers. They like tape it and then they cut it out and they do like a thinning process. Because imagine having hair like this and then it's like extra long. It could be very uncomfortable. full. And like there's like, so they'll do a thinning process to have like more flowy hair, and they donate that hair off to like wigs somewhere. But that's where I believe the name hood rat came from, because the Malaysian hair and the Temple of Rats. That's also where I believe a lot of black women lost their hair, is in Asians and other people being in control of our hair product and things like perms. What did Malcolm X do? Malcolm X started getting perms, because I'm looking back at like even down to the Bill Cosby show and a lot of the hair around the 80s. I'm like down to Diana Ross and all of these black, dark skin, light skin, whatever, talking about good about hair. Whether you're dark or you're fair, go on and swear, good in that hair. A lot of them had thick heads of full hair until they started using products that started taking out black hair so that they can then sell them hair weave. Oh, your hair fell out due to the perm Malcolm X told you to get. So now here's your weave or your wig to make up for that. And that's going to go into Johnson and Johnson too. And what they did after dumping chemicals in my hometown, they then that caused cancer, they then opened up the Cancer Institute, Robert Wood Johnson, and then they started making a hell of a lot of money off of cancer patients after causing cancer. I don't want to get too deep here, so I'm going to end it right here. But you know me, I'm going to jump around, read